Peach Girl's super pop love hurricane is about a girl named Momo and her friend, I say in quotation marks, who attend high school, and Momo has a reputation for being a slut because she has a very deep tan due to being in the swim team and doing a lot of swimming, but she is, in reality, probably the most innocent girl in her entire high school. And she has a crush on a sort of like childhood friend named Toji. And at the same time, the most popular guy in school, Kairi, ends up developing a sort of thing for her because she pulled him out of the ocean when he was drowning several years ago. So that's all very basic setup for a love triangle. But where Peach Girl ends up taking a bit of a divot is with the fact that Momo's friend Sai is just the worst person. Now, as we will talk about a bit later in Peach Girl, everyone in this show is terrible, but Sai manages to develop into a fucking supervillain by the end of this. It is actually kind of crazy. And this isn't a case of bad writing in that regard, because Sai is actually, I would argue, pretty much the primary antagonist of the show. She has basically befriended Momo specifically so she can fuck her over because she's jealous of her and make her life miserable. I'm not reading into this. This is the actual text. She even goes so far as to blackmail Momo's boyfriend once she gets one and steal him away. She goes out of her way to ruin her reputation, all of her friendships, and just do whatever she can to make her life miserable. There is one part, in fact, where she actually causes this guy who has a crush on her to essentially like semi-abduct Momo. And supposedly this scene is actually worse in the manga because Sai tries to get Momo raped, but that is not in the show itself. So yeah, Sai is an absolute villain. She really does make the early parts of the show sort of unbearable because of how far she pushes her villainy and the fact that she's a very manipulative person. And a lot of what Peach Girl revolves around is the concept of the people in the show literally refusing to have a single fucking conversation with each other. There's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of characters that could solve their problems by just conversing. Or once they do converse, just literally believing their partner and their significant other. And so many problems with the show would be very quickly solved. And Sai would not have gotten away with near the amount of bullshit. Now, let's be clear. Everyone in this show, except for arguably Momo, is actually a horrible person. Now, Momo's not a terrible person. She can be a bit hypocritical at times, but in reality, she's sort of innocent, naive, and she sort of believes the people around her. And she's also sort of like brash and impulsive. And this can lead her to believing characters she shouldn't, giving second chances when she shouldn't, and making snap decisions that she hasn't fully thought through all the way, while also being very wishy-washy about how she's going to resolve her love triangle at the end of the show. Now, Toji, on the other hand, refusal to communicate manages to progress to such a huge point that he literally, like, emotionally damages Momo for a good portion of the actual anime. And Kairi, at one point, tries to get Sai raped, which is a prevalent theme in Peach Girl, which is that all of the men in this are just basically rapists at worst and very aggressive at best. There's a lot of like grabbing girls and like pulling them and like throwing them down onto the bed and then pinning them down so they can't move and being like, no, you gotta listen to me. Very rapey, very sexually aggressive, very possessive. And this is an issue with every single male character in the entire thing. Although only one of the primary cast members, being Kairi's brother, actually attempts to commit rape as far as the male leads go. But to be honest, I don't think the bar should be that low. Like, I don't think not being an attempted rapist it should be the minimum. I think the minimum should be well before that. And so it ends up becoming an issue where it is hard to like anyone in the show, including Momo, because, again, she has so many fucking character flaws that she can become very frustrating to watch. Now, I will say this about Sai, which is she has a surprise face turn at some point during the show, and it's really when the romantic tension between the love triangle starts coming to a head, and it also marks sort of the craziest part of the show itself, which is that once Sai starts believing she is pregnant with Kairi's brother's child, she ends up she goes full fucking yandere and tries to murder Kairi's brother's girlfriend at the time. But once she calms the fuck down and gets over it, she ends up actively aiding in Kairi and Toji's relationship with Momo and sort of, I don't want to say redeem herself, because she is still arguably the second worst person, possibly the worst person in the entire show, but she starts using her pure evil powers to benefit the main cast. I also have to briefly address the fact that Sai is often portrayed as a cat, and I would like to just throw in there, for whatever reason, that I believe this might be a reference to the shape-shifting cats of Japanese folklore, which is the Bakeneko. She gives very much Bakeneko vibes to me, and I think that's sort of what the mangaka was going for. Now, Peach Girl itself was a very popular series. I have heard some people refer to it as a classic, but classic sort of requires a series to still be relevant, and Peach Girl has not been relevant for a very, very long time. But it was undoubtedly a very popular manga when it was running. It won an award in 1999, and it sold like 13 million copies. So popular, but I would hardly say it's still relevant today. If there is a relevancy in Peach Girl, it is actually a sort of interesting throwback to the past, which is to say that the tropes that Peach Girl plays with and utilizes to tell its stories are so completely outdated that my semi-limited knowledge and experience in shoujo romance genres, specifically in this sphere, actually, I'm more familiar with subversions of these tropes than the tropes being played completely straight like Peach Girl does. Like, it is actually so outdated that I'm more used to things going against this sort of grain. Sort of how, like, when mystery shows will reveal that the killer wasn't the butler is being more common nowadays than the killer ever actually being the butler, right? It's like that, but for, like, shoujo romance tropes. I actually hated Peach Girl for basically the entire runtime. I pretty much did not enjoy the vast majority of it, and I could not stand it basically from episode 1. And then the craziest things started to happen. As I started getting about midway through the show, it stopped being quite as bad. And I started developing a sort of Stockholm syndrome to it, because when we started getting into the Sai's pregnancy arc, I started finding myself more and more engaged with the show. And as the romantic subplot started reaching their heads at the end, I actually felt myself kind of admittedly interested in getting into it. And so it's actually kind of strange. The show gets better as it goes along. And as insane as it sounds, and I would not want this to happen, I actually think if the show was like 25 more episodes and it kept that same momentum, it might actually become decent. Now, to be very clear, the writing was kind of getting worse as it was going, but it sort of may hit a tipping point about midway where it became so soap opera-y that it ends up going around from being just complete dog shit teen melodrama into just becoming absolute absurd storytelling fun. And yeah, so Peach Girl was a completely unpleasant experience that I only watched because I got a request to watch, and I will never watch it again, but somehow, right at the end, it hooked me, and if it somehow hooks you even earlier, I can actually see why people might like this. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope. Bye-bye.